The unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Today I'm going to talk about joy. Maitreya, it's the festival of Maitreya, the Buddha that is to come. His name means loving kindness. Maitreya means loving, the loving one. And he embodies joy. You see his little statue here. I just like to bring that because it kind of is a counterpoint to the one on the altar. There's these two forms of Maitreya. The one on the altar is a representation of the one in Japan, which was a gift from Korea many hundreds of years ago. And this is Maitreya, the Buddha that is to come, the Bodhisattva perfecting his virtues, sitting still, contemplating. He's got this little crown. It's not a fully grown crown yet. It's this little crown. And he's perfecting his virtues, not in isolation, but just contemplating, looking at the mind. And then the other Maitreya is the laughing Buddha, who sits, he has a sack. You can't really see it, but he has a sack. And there was a monk many, many years ago who would carry a sack in China, carry a sack and give things to people, especially the kids. He's just a big smiling guy. And just had the sack and just pass things out to people. And then when he died, he left this verse saying, Maitreya is here, but people don't recognize him. And they thought, was that Maitreya? We missed him, And so they after that, they had this representation of Maitreya as the laughing, smiling Buddha, full of joy and merriment. Because that's the other side of the loving one, not just perfecting his virtues so he can be the Buddha. So you've got to be the next Buddha, you've really got to kind of work at it, But also just the loving one, not training in isolation, just here I am doing my own thing, but training with other beings, helping beings, love for beings. This statue, by the way, looks just like Reverend Master Jiyu. That's why I have it by my bed. Looks just like her. And she actually embodied joy. She would have hard times, things would be difficult, she wouldn't feel well all the time, but there was an underlying joy that would come bubbling forth. And I think that really shows it. Well, we don't talk about joy a whole lot. And sometimes in this world of, not always full of joy, it feels as though joy is like a sort of forced cheer. As Miss Manners says, there's nothing wrong with forced cheer, it's underrated. But forced cheer as opposed to grim reality. If it's grim, it's real. Grim reality. That must be what's really going on is the awfulness. And joy is just a kind of pretend thing. But it ain't so. The world can seem pretty dark when we see all that's going on. There's, I won't enumerate all the things that are going on, but there's all kinds of stuff happening in the world. And it's not always joy-making. Someone told me there's a trend now for joy practices, practicing joy, which sounds a bit contrived, practice, I'm going to practice joy. I'll do it if it kills me, Doing things intended to bring about joy. Well, actually, there's a certain wisdom in this. Noticing the small things that actually do bring us joy, the little things of life that you wouldn't necessarily notice because you're too busy worrying about what's going to happen later, Paying attention to these little moments when actually everything's fine. And we might feel joy if we're not all stressed out about something that hasn't happened yet. Like when it's warm and sunny, maybe a little too warm for the time of year, or warmer than we're used to, rather. And there you are walking along. Well, you can enjoy the warmth, or you can get all stressed out about climate change. You have a choice. Do we want to spend all our time? We may need to concern ourselves, but we don't have to worry about everything all the time. We can actually allow for joy, allow space for joy, and not just cram all our mind full of everything awful that might happen, or has happened, or is bound to happen. It's remarkable how much time we spend worrying about things, when you could simply just be here in this moment, simply walking in the sun, having a cup of tea, talking to a friend. The awful things haven't happened yet, and we can just be here now, fully doing what we're doing. This simple practice of mindfulness can bring us joy, because you can't be joyful when you're not present. You can't be joyful about something that might happen later or that happened years ago. You can, be grateful for it, but the joy is a present thing. It's a thing that's happening right now, this little moment, right now. Gratitude for what we have is part of joy. Just noticing those small blessings in our life. There's lots of them. And it's nice to notice them, be aware of them, be grateful for these little things. Seeing the beauty in things rather than just rushing by to the next thing. Just the beauty of the mountain with the light on it, or the bird singing his little heart out about something, probably cursing its neighbour. But these beautiful little things of life that are there all the time. It's not just being a sort of, oh, everything's lovely, I don't want to look at the bad side. It's allowing space for joy, ease, peace of heart, not just worrying about everything. Because we have a bit of a tendency, I think, to do the latter. Most of us are not constantly filled with joy. A lot of us worry more than we might find good for us. You can't really plan for joy. You can allow space for it, but you can't actually plan for it. It's kind of a gift. It just comes, And it's not the same thing as enjoyment. Enjoyment is taking pleasure in something, and it's fine. It's nice to take pleasure in things, but it's not the same as joy. If we didn't take pleasure in things, if we didn't enjoy things, life would be pretty dismal. You can plan to enjoy something. You can't plan for joy. You can plan your trip to Hawaii, but you can't guarantee you'll have a good time. You might get sick, you might break a leg, your weather might be terrible. Who knows what will happen. You don't expect that. You expect to have a good time. And then you can be setting yourself up for disappointment. The greater your expectation, the more likely you are not to have joy, because you're thinking, well, I paid a lot of money for this trip and I'm not having a good time. It's not as nice as I thought it would be. And then you might come home, have a cup of tea in your back garden, pet your cat, and feel a little moment of joy because it's over. You just never know. Because there's an expectation there. If you're planning something, you can't plan joy, actually. If you're planning and you're likely to be disappointed, you've sort of excluded joy. You left no room for it. You've got this little plan about what's going to happen, and joy is kind of squashed to the side. In joy, there's no grasping. I think that's the difference. You can't grab onto joy, because it's gone in a second. It just comes and goes. It's impermanent, like all other feeling. Enjoyment, or an intention of enjoyment, can be a grasping thing. We're going to have this really good time. I'm going to do this really nice thing, and it's going to be good. And you're kind of grabbing, or it's gone and you want it back. Enjoyment can be a bit of a trap, as I said, a set up for disappointment, because there can be that grasping. Can we hold on to it? Can we keep it? Because of the expectation. It's fine to enjoy things, as I said, but holding on to them, grabbing onto them, looking to them to make us happy is a setup for suffering. And joy is not like that. It's different. In our Buddhist training, as I said, we don't tend to emphasize joy a whole lot. Otherwise, you can sort of set up an expectation that we're going to be all blissful in meditation, all our problems will go away, we'll be enlightened, and then everything will be fine, we'll be happy forever. And that is definitely a setup for disappointment, because as we know, training isn't quite like that. But what training does do is help us to relinquish suffering. And this leaves room for joy and peace of heart. We learn not to spend all our time worrying about what's going to happen, not to spend all our time stressing about how we look or how we're going to get the thing we want, or our angry states of mind, or our resentments, our disappointments, and our despairs and fears and worries and all that. We learn not to drown in that stuff, but to let it all come and go. And then we leave space for a little peace of heart, maybe even a little joy. But that comes and goes too. It's not a long-term, we don't have moments of joy that go on for years. It would be kind of odd. Just comes and goes. It's a little fleeting moment of joy. And if we're paying attention, we notice it. It's funny how one can be actually quite at peace and not even notice. Just pay attention. Space for joy to arise. That stillness of mind, relinquishing the clinging on to suffering and plans and trying to get stuff, gives a space for joy to just come up spontaneously. A gift, as I said. You can't expect it. You can't plan for it. You can't really practice it. But you can have moments of pure joy. Sometimes it seems to go for years without feeling any joy at all, just like years of slogging through the desert day after day. But actually, when you look, there are little moments of joy. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own states of mind that we don't notice them. But they're there. They're there. And just to notice them with gratitude and leaving space for them, allowing the mind just to be still, not expecting little moments of joy, not expecting anything, because that's a setup for disappointment, as I said, but just allowing space for peace of heart and maybe just a little joy. You can't live for joy, otherwise you're miserable. Well, when am I going to have another joyful moment? That's not good. Because life is made of both light and darkness. You can't have everything light all the time. And it's not dark all the time. It comes and goes. It all comes and goes. And that's just how it should be. Because you can only experience joy when there's also darkness. You can only experience sorrow when there's also light. Otherwise, it just becomes a monotone. And you have to have that light and dark, joy and sorrow. When we've suffered a great loss, maybe somebody's died whom we loved, we don't need to pretend to be cheerful when we feel wretched. Of course we grieve, and to allow for that. But we can also have moments when we're not wretched. I was talking to someone about this the other day. There are moments when we're not completely crushed with grief. There are moments when we live our life. We might feel fine. We can have a laugh. We can go out with friends, do something nice. And sometimes people, they should be guilty about having a little piece of heart or a little moment of joy when someone's died. But the person would wish us to continue our life and not just feel sad all the time. So I think if we've been bereaved or something really sad has happened to us or whatever it might be, we don't have to kind of make a career out of sorrow, as it were. We can allow joy to arise, peace of heart, just a little contentment, because actually it's all completely within the realm of birth and death, that people live and die, we lose our friends, we lose the things we love. It's completely normal, and we don't have to be grief-stricken all the time, to have those little moments of joy, times of peace of heart, and then things get better. Otherwise we're just kind of overdoing it, as it were, or just getting stuck with something, again grasping onto something in the wrong way. Because life includes joy, no matter who we are. In our training, the real joy, I think, isn't just those little moments, although they point us to something. It's the quiet, underlying joy of following the path of training, knowing that we're on the path and we're doing something that is good. even when things are really difficult and dark. It's better than that wandering. I just remember when I was wandering, when I was a young person, wandering, and I'd wake up in the night and think, what am I doing? Where am I going? What's my life for? Here I am, I'm 23 years old, and I don't know the meaning of life, and I don't know what I'm doing. Well, it took a while. But that's that angst, that young angst, or even old angst. But when you find a spiritual practice, a spiritual purpose, boy, is it better. And there's a quiet joy in that, whether you're a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim, just following on spiritual path wholeheartedly brings this great joy. But it's quiet, and we don't always notice it. Following the heart that wants to train, following that which is good, that which calls us, is joy. It's underlying, it's quiet. We don't see it all the time. But it's there underneath. And every now and then we might have a little moment when it pops up. Oh, thank God. I'm following a spiritual path. Thank goodness I'm a Buddhist or whatever it is. You can't feel joy when you're doing something you shouldn't do. You might feel a guilty pleasure, but it ain't the same thing. And it's not really that much fun at all. You're not really enjoying things. It's sort of dismal, actually, and you can't live on that. There's an innocent purity in real joy. This is good to do. That purity of heart, it's like a childlike innocence, these little joyful moments, or that quiet peace and joy that you have from just doing the practice. Sometimes when we're making a choice about something, and we choose something, and we think, this is a good choice to do. And something in us is joyful. Yes, this is a good thing to do. I may be scared stiff, but it's good to do it, and I will do it. And there's a kind of a joyfulness or a relief. Yes, I'm going to do this. It's good to do. Or, no, I'm not going to do that dumb thing. I'm out of it. Joy, relief. The joy of doing that which is good to do. The Master says is beyond good and evil, beyond right and wrong. That which is good, making the choice that's wholesome, helpful, wise, kind, beneficent, rather than the dumb, selfish thing I was thinking about. And sometimes the way we know it's a good thing to do, a good choice, is when the heart says, yes, thank you, this is what we want to do. A little moment of joy kind of confirms, reaffirms, this is a good choice to make. Back to Maitreya, the loving one. He has a heart full of joy and merriment. Because he is the loving one, there's a clue. Because he has this loving kindness, his heart is full of joy and merriment. The manifestation of Maitreya with his heart, with his sack full of things he's giving to people. He takes joy in giving things to people. He's not just having a good time all by himself. He's joyful because he is the loving one. He loves beings. He gives to beings. And the monk carrying a sack is not having some kind of an agenda. Hasn't got his map or I'll go to this person and that person, that person. He just goes out in the street and hands things out to anybody. He doesn't decide, I don't think that person deserves anything. I think I'll keep it to myself and choose this nice person over here. He doesn't do that. He gives to everybody. Everybody deserves loving kindness. Everybody we can give our gifts of kindness to. Nobody unworthy, nobody excluded. And this is the clue for us. The practice of loving kindness, generosity, giving of ourselves. When we give of ourselves, there is joy. When we give something to another person, it's joyful. Don't give to somebody because we're going to feel joyful about it, because that kind of negates it to some extent. We give because we want to give. We want to give to them. We give because we know that actually we're not separate from them. We're not a separate being. We're all one being. And to give to another person dissolves that pretend barrier we have around ourselves. Just reaching through that barrier to give to somebody. Because the barrier isn't real. We're all one body. When we're selfish, keeping things for ourselves, we exclude joy. We're on the inside with all our stuff, and joy's out there somewhere. Selfishness is a miserable kind of prison. When we're selfish, we're just not a happy person. Those who give of themselves tend to be much more joyful. But we don't do it to be joyful. We do it because it's good to do. Joy includes, it embraces all beings, all things, no judgment, no cutting off, no this person is worthy and that person's not worthy. None of that. We just give of ourselves to all beings who come our way. We're not making some little path for ourselves to find the worthy beings. We might work in a soup kitchen, volunteer, help the homeless, all those kinds of things, and that's all good. And yet there's an aspect of happenstance in it. Somebody who comes our way, somebody we run into who's upset. The people we love, the people we don't know, the people we work with, all these people we encounter, whether deliberately or accidentally, or they're one to live with, we can give of ourselves to all of them. Nobody unworthy, nobody left out. And maybe especially those people we sort of think, oh, I wish I didn't have to work with this person. Oh, there they are again, maybe I'll hide and let them go by. Just to be able to say, hello, hi, how are you doing? Or whatever it might be. Give them something, give them a moment of kindness. And it's surprising how people respond. So this is Maitreya's teaching for us today. When we practice loving kindness, when we give of ourselves, without expectation, and without being a nice me who's giving something to somebody, but just doing it because it's good to do, then we embody peace and wisdom and joy. And that's our tip for the day.